Today, we're digging into a silent, high-stakes conflict, a fight that, believe it or not, powers our entire modern world. We're talking about the fight for rare earths. I want you to imagine something. It's 2025, and all of a sudden, the global auto industry just stops. Production lines in Europe, Japan, and the United States go dark. Car makers, suppliers, they're all in crisis mode. But the cause wasn't a labor strike, it wasn't some massive software bug. No, the entire high-tech world was brought to its knees by a shortage of what is essentially special dust. So how in the world did a handful of elements get the power to shut down the entire globe? To really get what's going on here, we first need to look at the material at the very heart of it all, what you could call technology's magic ingredient. Okay, so these are the rare earth elements, or REEs for short. Now, the name is a little misleading. They're not actually that rare in the Earth's crust. The tricky part is finding them all bunched together in deposits that are actually worth mining. But what makes them so incredibly valuable are their properties. I mean, we're talking about materials that can create the world's strongest magnets, stand up to insane heat, and do all sorts of unique things with electricity. And because of those amazing properties, these things are, well, they're everywhere. The sheer scope is just staggering. You know those powerful, lightweight magnets in your EV's motor? Or the ones inside those giant wind turbines? Those things that are basically the engines of the green energy transition? Yep, they need rare earths. The crazy, vibrant colors on your smartphone screen, the lasers in cutting-edge medical gear, the guidance systems in advanced military hardware, all of it, every single bit, depends on this group of 17 elements. They're like the invisible foundation of our modern world, from our economy to our national security. So you gotta ask, if these elements are so critical, how did one single country end up with a near monopoly on them? Let's unpack how China won this race. All right, so if you look at the mining numbers, at first glance they seem significant, but maybe not totally overwhelming. In 2023, China mined about 68% of the world's raw rare earth ore. The US, Australia, and a few others are also in the game. But here's the thing, mining is only step one. And this is where you see the real chokehold. It's all about refining, that super complex, messy, and chemically intensive process of separating the good stuff from the raw ore. And that process, it's almost entirely controlled by China. We're talking around 90% of the global supply. So you can dig up the ore anywhere on the planet, but to turn it into something you can actually use, you almost always have to send it to China. And you know what? This didn't happen by accident. If you go back to the 1980s, Western nations were getting really concerned about the environmental impact of refining. I mean, it produces some nasty, toxic, and even radioactive waste. So they offshored the industry. They moved it somewhere else. China, on the other hand, saw a massive strategic opportunity. With looser regulations and a laser focus on long-term resource dominance, they basically said, we'll take it. They welcomed the industry, they invested in the tech, and they patiently, methodically built their monopoly. And this quote from China's former leader, Deng Xiaoping, way back in 1992, really says it all. There is oil in the Middle East and rare earths in China. I mean, come on. They knew how important this was decades ago. They didn't just stumble into this dominance, they absolutely planned for it. And that strategic advantage has now become a really powerful weapon in a totally new kind of war. So let's go back to our 2025 scenario, which is drawn from what a lot of analysts are looking at right now. A trade conflict escalates. The US slaps Chinese imports with huge tariffs. And China's response? It's swift and it's surgical. They don't do a blanket ban on everything. Instead, they put strict export controls on just a handful of key rare earths. But by June, the ripple effects are felt across the globe, and factories start shutting their doors. And the crucial point here is the precision of this move. China didn't just pick any rare earths. They targeted specific heavy rare earths, the ones that are much harder to find and separate, but are absolutely essential for the highest tech stuff. Just look at dysprosium. You need it for high-performance EV motors that have to run hot, or scandium, which is used in critical, super lightweight aircraft parts. By controlling just these few, China could inflict maximum economic pain with what looks like a pretty small action. That shock was a massive wake-up call. So now let's look at how the world is fighting back, basically scrambling to build brand new supply chains from the ground up. The counter strategy is really unfolding on three main fronts. First, you've got onshoring, literally bringing production back home. Second is friendshoring, working with allies like Australia, Japan, and European nations to build secure, parallel supply chains. And third, there's innovation, trying to invent our way out of the problem by developing new tech that doesn't even need these materials. In the US, this isn't just talk, it's meant real money and actual projects. The Department of Defense is pouring almost $500 million into this, trying to reestablish a complete domestic supply chain. This means expanding the Mountain Pass mine out in California, and, this is huge, funding a new refinery in Texas with the help of an Australian company, which is set to open in 2026. And it's definitely not just the US. Japan, for instance, got hit with a similar supply shock from China way back in 2010, so they've been diversifying for years, investing heavily in refining projects with partners. The European Union has launched its own big strategy, the Critical Raw Materials Act, and really, across the board, the long-term goal is exactly the same: reduce this dependence by innovating new solutions. Okay, so this brings us to the final and most critical question. With all this effort, can China's dominance actually be broken? What does the future of this fight really look like? But this chart here offers a pretty sobering reality check. According to the International Energy Agency, even with all these new investments, China is still projected to control around 78% of rare earth refining in 2040. Now, that's down from 90% today, which is something, but it's still a totally commanding position. It just goes to show how incredibly difficult it is to undo decades of strategic investment. And this really is the core dilemma facing Western nations. On one hand, you can keep relying on China. That means lower costs and using a supply chain that's already built and super efficient. But it comes with a huge geopolitical risk. On the other hand, you can build your own independent supply chains. That gives you security and resilience, but it's going to mean higher cost for everyone and facing those same tough environmental fights that led the West to offshore the industry in the first place. And the scale of this challenge is just immense. This isn't a problem you can solve in a year or two. In the United States, just to get a new mine from discovery to actual production, navigating all the regulations, the environmental reviews, the financing, it takes on average 29 years. There are absolutely no quick fixes here. Which really leaves us with this final thought. We want the security of our own supply chains, we want the low costs we've all gotten used to, and we want a clean conscience, avoiding the environmental damage this industry can cause. The great geopolitical question of our time is, in a world literally built on rare earths, can we really have it all? That's the challenge we're all facing now.